If you think you have heard the most shocking story of betrayal, you must wait until you hear this one. This is not about business or politics. This is about family. When the antique dealer placed the $5 sticker on Margaret's most precious painting, nobody knew that this 73-year-old grandmother was about to unravel a lie that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her family, her marriage, and her own children. Margaret was 73 years old. Her entire life, she had been the definition of the perfect housewife. Her existence was dedicated to her husband, Robert, and to raising her children. She had been spectacularly successful at it. Her children were the family's pride. Mark, a high-powered corporate lawyer in New York, and Amelia, a respected surgeon in Chicago. They were wealthy, important, and had no time for their mother. In their eyes, Margaret had only one flaw, one embarrassing quirk. She collected antiques. Her successful children called it her junk collecting obsession. They looked at the antique porcelain, the oil paintings, and the mahogany furniture she had lovingly curated over 5 decades, and they only saw hoarding. This was the source of all their contempt. Every phone call, every holiday visit involved a belittling comment. They constantly asked when she was going to throw out all that junk and move into a sterile white condominium like their own. This was her deepest, quietest pain. The people she had dedicated her life to saw her passion as a sign of senility. But for Margaret, these items were not junk. Every piece had a soul, a history. She studied. She read auction catalogs, the way others read novels. She knew this world. It was a secret, deep expertise her arrogant children had never bothered to see. Margaret's quiet, predictable life shattered on a Tuesday when her husband of 50 years, Robert, died suddenly of a massive heart attack. The funeral was a blur of black suits and whispered condolences. It had barely ended. The soil on the casket not yet dry. When Mark and Amelia sat their mother down in the living room, they didn't come to grieve. They came to liquidate. They dropped the second bombshell. Their father, the stable accountant, had left behind massive, overwhelming, catastrophic debts. The bank wanted the house. Everything had to be sold. Immediately. Her children immediately took control. They were not her children in that moment. They were corporate negotiators handling a hostile takeover. They saw no grief. They saw only a financial problem that sullied the family name. The house had to be sold, and of course all of their mother's accumulated antique junk had to be liquidated to cover the debts. Mark, the lawyer, announced he had already brought in a friend to handle things quickly and painlessly. This man was a slick, arrogant antique dealer named Vincent, who wore an expensive suit and a smile that never reached his eyes. Margaret watched, numb, as this stranger, this shark, began to walk through her life. Vincent swept through Margaret's house like a storm. He carried a digital inventory scanner and a roll of price stickers. He looked at every single piece Margaret had dedicated her life to with undisguised contempt. He dismissed the 18th century porcelain she had spent years collecting as worthless reproductions. He labeled her rare furniture as workman error. Her children, Mark and Amelia, desperate to pay their father's debts and erase the scandal, nodded along with every word the dealer said. They completely ignored their mother's quiet sobbing. They dismissed her attempts to explain the history of a piece. This was the ultimate family betrayal. They were treating her like an incompetent child, an obstacle to be managed. Devastated and outnumbered, Margaret called her daughter Amelia that night. The surgeon, hoping for an ally, she explained, her voice trembling, that the appraisal felt wrong, that Vincent seemed dishonest. Amelia's response was ice. She informed her mother that she was currently saving actual lives and did not have time to worry about her hoarding problem. She stated that Mark was the lawyer. He knew best. and that Margaret needed to stop being sentimental and difficult, reinforcing the narrative that she was senile. Her daughter, the one she had raised, had completely abandoned her. She was utterly alone. Before we continue with this unbelievable story of betrayal, if you love jaw-dropping true-life stories and family drama like this, hit that subscribe button right now and see just how deep this conspiracy went. The next day, Vincent returned to finish the tagging. He came to the small, dark landscape painting in Margaret's bedroom. It was the first piece she and Robert had ever bought at a flea market 50 years ago. It was dark, moody, and her children always called it hideous. Vincent barely glanced at it. He stuck a tag on the frame, $20, frame value. Margaret shattered. It was over. Her children were right. Her expertise was a delusion. Her whole life had been a waste, collecting junk. That night, she was alone in the house for the last time. The auction company was coming at 9 a.m. to clear everything. She wept. She walked through her home, touching her beloved items, saying goodbye. She went to the $20 painting and took it off the wall. She would keep this one. It was her first memory with Robert. It was junk, but it was her junk. She began cleaning the decades of dust off the back of the frame, just wiping it gently with a cloth. Something snagged the fabric, tucked beneath the layers of grime and old paper backing. Carved directly into the wood of the original frame was a small, intricate mark, a seal. Margaret froze. She dropped the cloth. She knew that seal. She had seen it hundreds of times in the auction books she read in secret. This was impossible. It was the hidden, authenticated workshop seal of a 17th century Dutch master. This wasn't junk. This was a priceless, lost masterpiece. This one painting wasn't worth $20. It was worth more than the house, more than the debt, more than her children's salaries combined. And in that freezing, terrible instant, she understood. Vincent, the antique dealer, wasn't mistaken. He wasn't incompetent. He was defrauding her. He knew, and her children were either complicit in the crime, or they held her in such total contempt that they were too blind to see the truth. Margaret's grief vanished. It was replaced instantly by a cold, clear, diamond-hard focus. This 73-year-old housewife was about to go to war. She knew she needed confirmation, but she was surrounded by enemies. She used her phone and took high-resolution photographs of the painting, the frame, and the seal. She had one potential ally, a man her family had never met. Years ago, while volunteering at the local museum, she had befriended a brilliant, quiet art history professor, Dr. Alistair Finch. She sent the email. She attached the photos. She asked only one question: "Am I crazy?" The pressure intensified. Mark was pushing paperwork, demanding she sign everything before the 9 a.m. pickup. The auction was in 72 hours. This was the ticking clock. She acted the part of the confused, grieving widow perfectly. She lost the keys. She forgot the paperwork. She bought herself time. But Margaret knew she needed more. Why would Robert leave such debt? How was the dealer so confident? She went into the one room she had never truly entered, Robert's home office. Her children had already cleared it of anything important, or so they thought. They took the computers, the official files. They left the dusty accounting manuals on the shelf. Margaret pulled the boring manuals out. Taped to the back of the bookshelf, hidden, was a small black ledger book. It wasn't a business ledger. It showed decades of secret gambling losses, massive, catastrophic sports bets. Her husband, the stable, predictable Robert, was a high-stakes gambling addict. But that wasn't the betrayal. The betrayal was the second book, hidden inside an old dictionary. This one detailed personal payments. Her blood went cold. Her husband, Robert, owed the antique dealer, Vincent, a personal, enormous gambling debt. The estate sale wasn't just an auction. It was Vincent, the loan shark, collecting what was owed. Robert must have used the painting as collateral, and that's when the final darkest truth emerged. Robert knew her passion. He watched her study her books. He knew she was an expert. He must have known what the painting was. He had intentionally used his wife's greatest treasure as collateral with a shark, planning for that shark to seize it upon his death, classifying it as junk, so Margaret would never know she'd been disinherited by her own husband. This was the ultimate betrayal. Robert had betrayed her from the grave. Vincent was defrauding her. And Mark must have known. When he cleared the office, he must have found these ledgers. Mark wasn't just dismissing junk. He was actively helping his father's loan shark defraud his own mother, letting Vincent steal a multi-million-dollar masterpiece for $20 just to settle a shameful secret debt and protect the family name from scandal. Margaret felt nothing, just ice. She needed more. If Vincent did this to her, he had done it to others. She scanned the ledger. She saw another name linked to Vincent, a Mrs. Gable, an estate sale Vincent had handled 5 years prior. Margaret, the invisible housewife, became a detective. She found Mrs. Gable. She was no longer in her family home. She was in a cheap state-run nursing facility across town. Margaret visited her. Mrs. Gable told Margaret the exact same horrifying story. Her son had also trusted Vincent. Her late husband had a valuable stamp collection. Vincent had appraised it as worthless, sold it at a private auction to his own proxy bidder for pennies, and Mrs. Gable lost her house. Margaret now had the pattern. She had the proof. And she had the rage. The professor's email arrived at 2 a.m. His message was frantic. The seal was real. It was the lost Van Hysum, value estimated $10 million. Margaret knew what she had to do. She had one last chance to save her son. She called Mark. She told him it was an emergency. He arrived the next morning, hours before the auction pickup. Looking annoyed, he told her the movers were coming, and she needed to be ready. This was the final confrontation. Margaret, the grandmother, was gone. She was cold. She put 3 items on the kitchen table. The gambling ledger, Robert's second ledger detailing the debt to Vincent, and the printed email from Professor Finch, valuing the $20 painting at $10 million. Mark stared at the items. His face didn't show horror. It didn't show remorse. It showed pure animal fear, fear of exposure. He immediately tried to gaslight his mother, claiming the email was a scam, that the old professor was senile, that the painting was worthless. Then, when she didn't blink, he begged her. He demanded she destroy the ledgers. He insisted this would ruin the family name. He told his mother that, even if the painting was real, the money morally belonged to Vincent to cover the debt, and she must honor their father's secret. He looked his mother in the eye and chose the thief, the lie, and the reputation over her. The betrayal was absolute. Margaret just nodded, as if accepting defeat. She told him he was right. She was just a confused old woman. She would let them take the junk. Mark, relieved, patted her on the shoulder and went outside to call Vincent and tell him the problem was handled. Vincent and the movers arrived an hour later. Margaret was the perfect picture of the broken widow. They walked through the house, tagging the last items. They got to the bedroom and pointed at the masterpiece, still hanging on the wall. $20. Take it. As the mover reached for it, Margaret put her act into overdrive. She let out a small sob. She tripped over her own feet, stumbling forward, accidentally spilling an entire massive pot of scalding hot coffee directly onto the antique dealer's $1,000 suit. It was chaos. Vincent screamed in pain and rage. Mark panicked, grabbing napkins. The movers didn't know what to do. For 2 critical minutes, everyone was focused on the screaming dealer. Everyone except Margaret. While they were all distracted, she moved with the speed of a shadow. She grabbed the real painting off the wall. She ran into the attic hallway. She grabbed the replacement she had prepared last night. Another worthless flea market painting of the same size, in an identical frame, which she had aged with tea and dust. She ran back, made the switch, and hung the fake painting back on the wall. The entire swap took less than 30 seconds. Vincent, furious and soaking wet, ordered the mover to just grab the worthless junk and get out. The mover grabbed the fake $20 painting. Vincent and Mark, too arrogant to double-check junk they already owned, didn't even look at it. They just wanted out. They left. Margaret stood in the empty hallway, watching them drive away with a forgery. She took the real painting, wrapped it in her favorite knitting blanket, placed it in her large knitting bag, and walked out the back door. She went straight to Professor Allister. The auction was chaos. Vincent was there, having changed his suit, eager to complete his theft. His proxy bidder was in the crowd. They watched as Lot 34B was brought to the stage. The fake. The auctioneer began the bidding. Vincent Fett's proxy immediately raised his paddle. $20. Sold. The auctioneer was about to yell, "Stop this auction." The voice boomed across the silent hall. It was not the weak whisper of a widow. It was the command of an expert. Everyone turned. Margaret, 73 years old, was walking down the aisle. She was flanked by Professor Alistair Finch, 2 police officers from the Art Fraud Division, and the other widow, Mrs. Gable, in a wheelchair. Vincent froze. Mark, standing in the back, turned white. Margaret walked straight onto the stage. She took the microphone from the stunned auctioneer. She was no longer acting. She confronted the dealer and her son in front of the entire community. She held up the real painting. She revealed the 17th century seal. She revealed her husband's gambling debts. She revealed the loan shark arrangement and the criminal conspiracy. She revealed the auction fraud, pointing to the fake painting on the easel. And then she pointed to Mrs. Gable, presenting her as proof of Vincent's predatory pattern of fraud. She wasn't a naive collector. She was the expert, and she had just destroyed them. Vincent was arrested on the spot for felony fraud, conspiracy, and predatory lending. The auction house was shut down. Mark, the lawyer, faced the ethics board. When the news of his conspiracy to defraud his own grieving mother to cover a gambling debt became public, he was disbarred. He lost his career, his reputation, and his family. Amelia, the surgeon, was publicly disgraced by her association and her callous abandonment of her mother. The resolution was swift. The painting was authenticated by international experts. It was worth millions. Margaret didn't sell it. With the authentication papers, the bank immediately canceled the foreclosure and offered her a massive line of credit. She used her expert knowledge to sell 2 other smaller pieces from her collection. Pieces the dealer had also missed, and paid off every cent of her late husband's shameful debts. She kept the house. The last time anyone saw her, she was not in some sad retirement home. She was in her family home, which was no longer cluttered. It was curated. It was recognized as one of the finest private antique collections in the state. She cut Mark and Amelia out of her life entirely. She sat in her living room, surrounded by the beautiful history she had saved, teaching her grandchildren, the children who now saw her as a warrior, how to spot a forgery and the crucial difference between a simple price tag and true priceless value.